In this lesson, we'll take a look at how Outlook Web Access behaves when our client access servers are configured for redirection. So here I am again at the PC that is in the Brisbane site with my user Adam Woolley, and I'll just go to that Outlook Web Access URL again and log in. Now you'll notice this time, instead of being taken to the Outlook Web Access interface, instead I get this page displaying a message that says use the following link to open this mailbox with the best performance, and there's a different URL published here, so that's mail-bne.exchangeserverpro.net/OWA. So why has that changed? Why am I now seeing this redirection URL instead of the previous scenario where the client access server in Sydney proxied the traffic to the Brisbane server for me? To answer that question, let's take a look at how I've reconfigured my Brisbane Exchange server. So in the Outlook Web App directory, I've added an external URL of mail-bne.exchangeserverpro.net/OWA. So why would you do that in the real world? Well, the idea is that you want to be able to publish a single webmail URL such as mail.exchangeserverpro.net and have that be the URL that anyone in the world uses. So there's only one URL to remember, but that URL can only direct them to a particular location, such as Sydney, which may not be the most well-connected location for where they're actually located. So if you think about geographically dispersed organizations where they may have people in America, some in Europe, and some in Australia, it makes sense for perhaps the Australian users to be redirected to an Australian URL and the European users to be redirected to a European URL, and so on like that. So that behavior is simply referred to as redirection, and the way that you make it happen is simply by configuring this external URL. So when that external URL is not present, the client access servers will proxy traffic from, for example, Sydney to Brisbane. When it is present, they will detect that there is a better external URL that the client should be connecting to, and they will redirect the client to that instead, which is why the user sees this behavior here. Now, aside from that prompt, I also have just an issue here in my test lab where I haven't configured my Brisbane Exchange server with a certificate. So that's fine. In the real world, you would make sure that the certificate was correctly configured with that additional URL. And I'm also getting prompted here for authentication again. If I enter my credentials, we're able to get in okay. Now, being prompted with that URL to click on, and then again with the credentials, is not necessarily going to be the best experience for the users. So what we can do is apply a configuration that is known as cross-site silent redirection. So I'll close down my browser there. We'll jump back to the Brisbane server. And what we need to do on the Brisbane server is switch the authentication type back to forms-based logon. And I'll just choose the format of username only and pre-configure the logon domain there. Apply that change. Of course, we have to do the same for the Exchange Control Panel again. And as that warning said, we need to do an IIS reset for that change to take effect. Now, the last step is to configure the cross-site redirect type on the Outlook Web Access virtual directories, and we need to do that for the Sydney servers, the Sydney Exchange servers, of which I actually have two. So I'll jump into the shell. Now let's have a look at those two servers. So I'm just using get exchange server to get SID-EX and the wildcard character, piping that into get OWA virtual directory, and I'll just select the server, the name of the virtual directory, and the cross-site redirect type setting, and put that in a table for easy viewing. And then we have the two client access servers, CDX1, CDX2, and their OWA default website are virtual directories. And currently their cross-site redirect type is set to manual. So the other option that is available for that attribute is silent. So that's what I will configure now. So we use the same commandlet. We're just going to vary that a little bit. Set our virtual directory cross-site redirect type and set that to silent. That change is complete. Now there's a warning that appears that just lets us know that in order for the server to successfully perform a cross-site redirection, the corresponding virtual directories in the target Active Directory site, so the target Active Directory site in this case is Brisbane, must have an external URL specified that leverages the HTTP SSL protocol, and we can see that our Brisbane Exchange server does have an external URL configured that leverages SSL. As well as that external URL configuration on the Brisbane Exchange server, of course we also need to make sure that there is an A record in DNS for the mail-BNE name pointing to the IP address of that Brisbane Exchange server, so that the clients and other servers can actually resolve it from DNS. So jumping back to our workstation in Brisbane, I'll log on again as Adam Woolley. So I'm still going to mail.exchangeserverpro.net, that single URL that resolves to Sydney. When I sign in this time, instead of being prompted with that manual redirection URL, I'm taken straight to mail-bne.exchangeserverpro.net. And aside from this SSL warning, because I haven't configured that SSL certificate, just logs me straight back in without having to log on a second time. So that experience is being much improved using that silent cross-site redirection. And you'll find that with just a few simple configurations. Now there are some caveats about silent cross-site redirection. I'll put a link below this video that goes to a Microsoft article that summarizes those caveats. There are some conditions where it can't be used, but if you do match the conditions where it can be used and you want to have separate URLs for different sites within your organization, then this is a very useful feature to deploy. And if you are testing this yourself in your own environment, just be aware that some of the changes as you make them take a little bit of time to replicate between different sites before those changes take effect, so you just need to be patient and allow that replication to occur in between your changes and when you're doing your testing.